panel is an opportunity to really focus on what's working in schools. And I'm going to challenge each of you as you ask your questions of this panel, which we will have plenty of time for, as we've tried to create time for questions throughout the day. You can share one thing that you're seeing working in schools before each of your questions. Again, we recognize the expertise in the audience, and we want to give you all a chance to share what you see that's working as well. So planting that seed early, giving you plenty of time to think about it. But now I will get on to my actual job of moderating. So for this panel, we are delighted to have a full panel of women. I think this may be the second time this has happened today. First, we will have Dr. Amra Sabak Alrez and Lauren Gonzalez are going, we've got sound now on the video. Just a brief thoughts on this topic. Obviously, you saw their presentation earlier. After them, we will turn to Lori Aldahuth, who founded Make Our Schools Safe after deep personal tragedy. And then we'll hear again from Dr. Mackenzie Scheiman with the National Association for Behavioral Intervention and Threat Assessment. So that is our panel. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Amra and Lauren.
Thank you. I'm going to let Lauren take the lead here, and then I'll follow.
Okay. So a little bit about the Reimagine Resilience program. It was built for educators by educators. And that's really what we want to instill, that educators are the experts within their schools. And we really want to create the urgency, the tools, the resources that they can utilize and take into their classrooms or take into their schools. This program was funded by the Department of Homeland Security's Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program, and it was initially started as a student-led project through the DHS's Invent to Prevent program. But our overall project goal is to really design, build, and roll out a national program and professional development opportunity to create that block to prevent students from going down the path of educational displacement. So we really want it to be a holistic prevention method. In that educational staff can cultivate resilience to hate among their students as well as their other educators in U.S. schools. And overall, we aim to amplify and employ prevention strategies in schools through social connection, resilience, building, storytelling, and curiosity. So a little bit about the scope of the program. We really aim to prevent and reverse increasing violent behavioral and social threats facing U.S. schools and among youth. We know that behavioral and disciplinary issues are on the rise in schools, so we really want to be able to kind of prevent that through creating these resilience capacities and social connection. The program was created using the educational displacement model steps, and each course was designed to reflect a component of the Resilience to Hate framework. And we really want to raise awareness among teachers on the educational displacement model. Yes, and as we said, we're providing insight, tools, and practices to support educators and educational staff to prevent targeted violence and radicalization. Then a little bit about the sequence. So overall, this will be a 30-hour professional development program consisting of 10 courses. One course is mandatory, which will be about 6 hours, and then the sequential 9 will be optional but encouraged. We recommend them in sequential order, and the courses will really range from 1 to 6 hours, depending on where they are in the program. It's hosted through Columbia University Teacher College's Canvas Learning Management System, so it will be accessible online to any educator who wants to take it across the nation. We want to make sure that it's self-paced, so it's not really taken within a set amount of hours, but they have extended amount of times and they're able to take it at their leisure. Also, upon completion of each course within the program, they will be receiving professional development units or continuing education units, CEUs, to make sure that they're able to receive that professional development credits for it. And we used a variety of different education technology modalities. such as Articulate, Mentimeter, Padlet. We utilize social media such as Instagram, I think Pinterest as well, Facebook, to really create those networks to make sure that teachers are able to interact with each other while also creating that greater message to those who might not be involved in the program and those who might just be interested in what we're trying to provide. Let's see. This is the kind of the outline of what a participant would see upon entering Module 1, or Course 1. So we see that it consists of 3 different modules, first of which being self-awareness, community awareness, and, awareness among their community. Ooh, it's a little, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. Self-awareness, community awareness, and social awareness. So that kind of being in Module 1. Module 2 being connection through community, and Module 3 being educational displacement and introducing that concept. So this is the mandatory course. No matter what, if you're entering the program, you got to take this. We want to make sure that the participants who are coming into this really understand the foundational methodologies and pedagogies that we're trying to get across. And then here we have a little demo. We'll see if it works. If you can click through it, we'll see. Yep, so here we go through kind of different types of displacement which might occur at schools. Let's see if we can scroll down. This is kind of an example of what a participant will see upon going into the course. So this is our tech lead, Tina Kaswani, created this using Articulate. And from here we see these different types of displacement. So if you want to click on one of the little blue bubbles, we can see it's very interactive. And the participants will have to click through and go through all these concepts before going on to the next portion of the course. So just clicking through, we can kind of see the different types of displacement that one might occur within the school system. So not only kind of getting this informational component, but once you click through, I think there should be a prompt to go on to the next slide if you scroll down a little bit. Yeah. And then also having these more interactive components. So here participants will be able to click and drag the example to the different types of displacement. If you want to demo that for me, that'd be great. So really making sure that teachers are engaged, and even though it is asynchronous and they might not be face-to-face, and being able to talk with another colleague, that they're able to kind of go through and check their knowledge. We won't hold it against you, but it might do it a couple times. So with that, I think kind of getting the gist of the demos and kind of the interactivity that we try to instill within the course. And I think that might be it. And then just some of our resources. And then whipping out the QR codes again. This will kind of put you onto our mailing list. So if you're interested in not only having educators that you know or a school that you know take this course, if you're interested in yourself or want to get involved or continue this conversation later, please feel free to scan the barcode to join our mailing list. Also, we have our website down there, reimagineresilience.org, to learn more about our program.
Lauren, is there a cost to this program?
No, it is completely free.
With one caveat, it's free during the duration of the grant, which means if educators were to register in September, they would actually have a year to complete the training, the full 30 hours. We also have funding to make up to 20 trips throughout the country. So if any of you, let's say were a head of school or head of organization and you were putting together a professional development day within your community, we could actually, free of cost for you, come out and do one of the workshops. The first course will also have an option to do it in person. And so in some cases, we already have schools. I would estimate conservatively that we already have around 500 educators that have expressed interest in this training, and a number of institutions that would like for us to come in person and offer this training to them. And again, thanks to DHS, we were able to, one, do this and make it free of cost for year one.
And Lauren, I'm going to ask you a question for a moment here because, as Brooklyn mentioned earlier, like empowering students to take an active role can be a really important protective factor. So what was your experience like creating this program as a student and participating in Invent to Prevent?
No, absolutely. So at least within my own education journey, I did feel that within the school system that I did have barriers that really prevented me from being kind of the best student that I could, in the sense where in some cases I felt like I was discriminated against because my last name's Gonzalez or because I am a woman, and kind of being expected to go into these different categories. So I think that being able to take a leadership role in not only executing and being able to lead the curriculum development lead in Invent to Prevent, and really being able to kind of like work with Amra and being so empowered by kind of the work that she's doing and having trust within us, having these leadership opportunities to not only execute this program, but be able to take it to this level where I can talk to you all about it and share about it has been really incredible, and I've been so grateful to have these opportunities.
All right, thank you. Lori, I want to turn to you next and make our school safe.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Aladeff, and I'm really happy to be here today, share with you my story. I graduated from the College in New Jersey and also got a master's degree in education. And I was a school health and physical education teacher for 5 years. And then I had my 3 children, Alyssa, Robbie, and Kobe, and I was a stay-at-home mom for 14 years. I was a soccer mom, doing all the amazing things moms love to do. On February 14th, 2018, my life just was destroyed. I received a text message saying, shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School, kids running and jumping the fence. And I immediately had a sense of loss that came over my body. I knew something was drastically wrong. And I just got in my car, I drove as fast as I could. I was stopped in traffic. I drove my car up on a sidewalk, and I just started running towards the school. We were stopped by law enforcement. Everybody was gathering. Nobody really knew what was going on. And Alyssa's best friend, Abby, came. And I remember looking at Abby, and you know, because Abby and Alyssa were always together, and I said, Abby, where's Alyssa? Seconds later, Abby got a text message, and I said, what? And she said, Alyssa was shot. I immediately fell to the ground and started to scream, but I got back up, and I started running. And because in my mind, I thought Alyssa was shot, she's at the hospital. They've taken her to the hospital. And the police officer, he didn't know what was going on, and I was taken to what they called at the time the reunification center. However, it wasn't even set up yet. There was nobody there. And I ended up going with another police officer to the hospital. But unfortunately, there was somebody in the emergency surgery. They said it was a Jane Doe, but unfortunately, it wasn't Alyssa. I went back now to the reunification center, and there was hundreds of people there. I ended up waiting and waiting and waiting until at 2:30 in the morning, the FBI called my family into a room. And at that point in time, he said, I'm not going to talk in front of me. And I said, no, just say it. And in the most horrific moment of my life, they told me the wrong information to say that Alyssa was shot in the face and was unrecognizable. That was the wrong information that they told me. And I left that day, you know, in trauma, as you all know, you know, your head is spinning. I didn't even know what was happening or what was going on. And it drastically changed my life forever. My daughter, Alyssa, at some of the tables, you'll see a picture of her. She was 14 years old, and she was amazing, vivacious, such zest for life. And she was a soccer player. She was captain of our soccer team. And the next day, I went to the park, and there was all these media there. And I told one of the reporters I had something to say. And she just tossed her hair like this, and she said, well, I'm not on the air. So I went down the line, and I told another reporter I had something to say, and he handed me a microphone. And if you remember that woman who screamed at President Trump to do something, to take action, well, that was me. And so I decided to turn my pain and grief into action. I started a nonprofit organization called Make Our Schools Safe, and we are focused on passing Alyssa's Law nationwide as a standard level of school safety protection, where we empower our teachers to push a button on their phone, and it's directly linked to law enforcement so they can get on the scene as quickly as possible to triage the victims or take down the threat. We've successfully passed Alyssa's Law in the state of Florida, New Jersey, and most recently New York. And our next state that we are going to be passing Alyssa's Law is going to be Texas. The governor of Texas already allocated $17.1 million for this, and now it just needs to go through the legislative process. Secondly, our Make Our School Safe clubs, where students in high schools create a culture of safety within their schools. And we've also been working with Invent to Prevent with the school safety projects for our students to create that culture within their schools. And then lastly, I just want to talk about, I also knew that in order for me to make an impact and make change, I needed to have a seat at the table. So I ran for the school board of Broward County, which is the 6th largest school district in the country, and have been on the school board for the last 4 years, and I'm also running for re-election next month. And just quickly, this slide, and I hope we can make it available. If you go to our website, makeourschoolsafe.org, and sign up for our email list, in the next couple weeks, we are going to be sending this slide out. But it was my way of saying how we can create these layers of safety within our schools to help make our schools safe. Thank you.
And Lori, when your clubs on campus are trying to create that culture of safety, what have you found to be most innovative or most impactful that those clubs have done so far?
So the premise of this was really after the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, the students, if you remember, they started March for Our Lives, but they were focused on gun control. But Make Our Schools Safe students, I wanted them to specifically just focus on school safety, and I wanted them to own it. Like, yes, we do have a curriculum that we give them to try to follow, but I really wanted it to come from them on what is going to help them be able to focus and make this culture within their school safer. And luckily they're doing the projects through Invent to Prevent, and the students are really coming up with the ideas. We just had a club in New York. They did a fundraiser, and they got money to pay for a Stop the Bleed kit in every classroom of their high school. And then not only did they do that, they went and got training to have all the students in their high schools trained on Stop the Bleed. And that, and it is sad, but that is helping them to feel safer in their school.
Thank you, Lori. Mackenzie, you did a phenomenal talk this morning already, but I think you had a couple more slides you wanted to share.
I do, but it's pretty much what I talked about this morning, so I will try to add a new spin to it here and give you all, is that the right one? Okay, thank you. So this panel was aimed at what's working in schools. And before I even get into any of my content, I just want to say how excited I have been today. I think this is the first time I've ever been at a violence prevention focused symposium where 99% of the content has not been about hardening our schools, hardening them as targets, but we've been talking about our students as people, as humans, that we can grow and develop into more well-caring people that are less likely to engage in violence because we care about them as a person. So thank you to all of the panelists and all of you asking questions. I'm inspired by the amount of people in this room that are dedicated to this work in terms of approaching it from like a humanistic wellness prevention oriented lens. So thank you all for the work that you do. So that being said, what's working in schools? I'm presenting this from the model of the behavioral intervention teams that I talked about this morning. We see behavioral intervention teams as a framework for improving the wellness, improving the safety in our school. And I'm gonna steal your metaphor of the plate, and I'm probably gonna use it in my teaching from now on. That behavioral intervention teams are small groups of school officials who meet regularly to collect and review information about at-risk community members and develop plans to assist them. And we often get the pushback from teachers or from administrators that they can't put one more thing on their plate. And just like your model's the plate, mine's like a plate with your plate, maybe. Like they're both. Yeah, placemat to put the plate on. I like that. Yeah, this isn't a behavioral intervention team is not another thing on the plate. It's a way, it's a framework to bring all of these other programs, all these other interventions, all these other teams into one place. Most schools already have in place a critical response team, maybe a suicide awareness team. They have an IEP, disability support team. They might have a PBIS or MTSS team. They have all these teams doing all these.
Define some of those acronyms for people who don't know them.
Sure. So positive behavioral intervention support would be PBIS. Multi-tiered system of support is MTSS. SEL, social emotional learning teams. So they have these teams with these individual missions or charges to do good work in the school. Behavioral intervention teams do not replace any of that. They do not supplant any of it. They become a framework to deploy those teams in the most effective way. So what I mean by that is referrals come in right now in schools, probably to a lot of different channels, right? If a student engaged in disruptive or aggressive behavior, that might get reported to the assistant principal for some discipline action. But if a student was tearful, they were sad, they were being bullied, they were experiencing some emotional health concerns, that might get referred to the student's school counselor. If they are experiencing financial insecurity, food insecurity, they may be referred to a community social worker. These are pieces of that student's life, pieces of the puzzle of their life that are getting referred to individual responses, individual teams for addressing, but nobody's bringing the puzzle pieces together in that model. Nobody's bringing these puzzle pieces of the student's experience together to see the whole picture of what's happening for a student. And that's what we see behavioral intervention teams as doing, as being the one centralized place to refer any concern, and then that team reviews it, assesses it, and deploys the right resource to support it. And that right resource might still be the school social worker to address food insecurity. That right resource might still be the school counselor to address an emotional health challenge. That right resource might be a trained teacher who is the one trusted adult for that student. But we are now putting that all together. We're bringing the puzzle pieces together and having a coordinated system of response that gets the right support to the right students at the right time. These behavioral intervention teams, like I talked about this morning, should be charged with responding to a spectrum of risk, right? These are not threat assessment teams that are responding just to threats. They are teams that respond to anything from incredibly low risk concern for a student up to high risk. And then the interventions are tailored to match the level of risk that was reported to the team. So we can, like I said, connect students to resources and manage threat when it does emerge. Well, that's weird. Sorry about that. BITS do this through this three-step process that I talked about this morning. We gather referrals from the community about students who are struggling, assess the risk, and deploy interventions to support and match that level of risk.
So, Mackenzie, can you tell us, how do you staff
Yeah, great question.
these behavioral intervention teams? What types of background, training do you include on these teams?
Yeah, we want teams to be multidisciplinary and diverse. And I mean that in the broadest term of the word diverse, right? We want diverse positions on the team, but diversity in persons on the team as well, to the extent that you can in the school, given your resources. But the behavioral intervention teams are staffed by existing school officials. This does not require hiring additional staff. It does not require an additional staff person to run the team. So usually at the K through 12 level, we see about 5 folks on the team, 5 to 8, depending on the size of the school. But that's usually your principal, your assistant principal, somebody from special ed or overseeing the IEP process, a mental health official, and if the school has an SRO, school resource officer, or a relationship with local law enforcement, they would serve on the team as well. So we want people coming to the team that have various lenses on the student experience, right? A mental health official or counselor is going to look at a situation differently than a law enforcement officer would, who's gonna look at it differently than your special ed teacher would, who's gonna look at it differently than your assistant principal that oversees the student discipline process would. We want all of those lenses contributing to the risk assessment and to the development of the interventions for the student, so that way we're responding to the holistic needs of the student and assessing it from all perspectives. So existing school staff, usually school administrators, to give you a much shorter answer.
All right. So now it's time to open it up to all of you. I will remind you of the challenge, which is, as you ask your question, please introduce yourself and share one thing that you have seen working in schools or one thing you'd like to see tried. Don't be shy. Jordan.
I wanted to go second, but okay. My name is Jordan Reimer. I'm a researcher at the RAND Corporation. Cards on the table, I have not looked into the school issue as much as I've looked into other aspects of this dimension, so I'm learning a lot here. So thank you. My question is for Ms. Al-Hadef. I was just wondering, we didn't talk a lot about hardening, and I apologize, this is a little bit about that because I saw that your flyers talk about Alyssa's Law, which is about using panic alarms in all schools, which I imagine is a form of hardening. And in the past couple of weeks, we saw some ridiculous suggestions of how to harden schools by only, locking all doors. And I'm wondering, are any policymakers talking to you or your team about smart ways to harden schools, like panic alarms or other aspects that I'm sure your team has thought of? Thank you.
So we're required in Florida, after 2018, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act was passed. And part of that law is for every year, schools to do a risk assessment. And so that is done by a school safety expert person. So based on that risk assessment, whatever those vulnerabilities are within that campus, because every campus has its own unique needs, then that's what we need to fix, to harden, right? The school might not have a perimeter fencing for single point of entry. They might not have a locked front door with a security office and a buzzer and camera, so the person can say what is their intent for being there and showing their license and ID before they get buzzed into the school. So based on that assessment, then that's the plan, the game plan for the school to be able to apply for grants or state money or federal money to fix those issues and problems specifically at their school.
And Jordan, I know you tried to get away with this, but what's one thing you've seen working in schools or you would like to see tried? You're not going to get away with that.
There was talk earlier about, thank you. There was talk earlier about threat assessment teams. I know that you use different language, but it seems to me that it's not just about the threat assessment, but it's about the threat management team, which is why I know that McCain uses TAMT, threat assessment and management team. So again, I haven't looked into this, but it seems that it's not just about assessing the threat, but it's about having a wraparound provision of services to actually manage that person's needs and meet their needs to reduce any potential threat.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of we see, even in schools that might have some sort of assessment team, behavioral assessment, threat assessment, that they see the assessment as the end of the story instead of the start of the story. That's where we learn what the student needs, and absolutely that next step needs to be interventions that we need to do. Once we know the information, we need to do something to manage the information that we learned.
And self-interested commercial, our last symposium was on integrating assessment and management, and those videos are all available online for anyone who would like to go back and watch that content. Other questions?
You guys are amazing and very inspiring. And again, I could be here all day. So we're going to do this again soon, please.
November 2nd, you got it.
Okay, thank you. I'm Angela Wilson Turnbull. When I think of things that have worked, it's like a personal story. So this was middle school in Fairfax County. My daughter got a text from one of her classmates that she was like, you know, the bullying, the online bullying, that she was gonna take herself out. And my daughter ran and told me, and we immediately contacted law enforcement. And they were able to track her on her cell phone. Like, we went to her house with law enforcement, and then she was not in Virginia, she was actually in Maryland. And her life was spared. And my daughter developed an anti-bullying campaign that was implemented in the school. And then she presented it in Congress, you know, like at a women's conference. So for me personally, and I think back, like how did my adolescent girl have the courage to come and talk to me? And I think it starts with us educating our own children. Like I normally would bring my daughter to stuff like this. So how do we, my question is, how do we do a better job in educating our own children, our own students, our own communities, so they're empowered to take critical action wherever the crisis exists? Thank you.
Lori, please.
So we have a statewide See Something, Say Something app called Fortify Florida. There's also Safer Watch app. But what I do is I tell our parents, like, I want to empower our parents that if there is some type of threat or bullying, there's ways to report this on the app. They can report it as themselves or anonymously. And this threat, it goes directly to law enforcement so they can, you know, try to figure out maybe they need to go to their house. Maybe that person said they're going to shoot up the school. They need to go to their house, and we have red flag laws in Florida so they can see if they have access to weapons or guns. So whether to see this as a credible threat or not. So I definitely would encourage your schools to have a See Something, Say Something app so that you can be able to report these threats, but feel empowered, and as parents or students, to feel empowered to be able to report the threat. And we have prevented lots of violence from happening before it happens.
Does anyone else want to tackle this question?
I think what's also interesting, and what your daughter did was amazing, and I think we need to give more platforms for students to create these initiatives on their own. And I think, I know Invent to Prevent went to start doing high school programs, which is so incredible, because I think high school students really know the solution to a lot of the problems. I think middle school students know the solution to a lot of the problems, and sometimes it's not as complicated as we try to make it. So I think a lot, but creating opportunities for students to really have those voice and leadership opportunities is so crucial to have in schools.
Especially because we know peers are more likely to listen to their peers, right? So if it's a peer education program and they're the ones teaching students about creating this culture of care, about this anti-bullying, they're going to believe their peers more than they will believe an administrator.
Absolutely.
I'd like to note I also created a violence prevention program when I was in elementary school, so you can start as early as you want. People claim I'm an outlier, but I still claim you can start as early as you want.
I would just add, you know, there's a famous concept by Pablo Freire that we use in our training, which is the idea of true dialogue. What is true dialogue? Opening that space, the environment you created for your daughter to feel comfortable enough to tell you in that crisis moment what was happening. And true dialogue is really engaging with equal parties, equal partners, having respect for that young adult so that when it is time to come to you with something that perhaps might be a failure or fear, that it can come out naturally. And having a sense of humility and respect in that conversation, I think we often miss that. There's this sort of sense of hierarchy that we tend to embed, whether it's in education, in workplaces, in family environments, that precludes young people from believing in themselves. I think something that Lauren has mentioned, and I think that I try, probably not in a perfect way, but certainly make an effort to do, even in working with my team, to ensure that everybody has that sense of and feeling, I can tell you anything. You can tell me anything. There's no consequence to you telling me. There's a consequence if we're not aware of a particular situation, and that consequence in this context could be a loss of life.
Brooklyn, please.
Hello, thank you for this. This is Brooklyn, and I think this is connected to your question. One thing I'm seeing working in schools is a focus on youth needs and youth interest. In a school, I had a 5th grade teacher share with me, she had a boy who came in every day, hood up, head down. We know these students, right? Hood up, head down. And I encouraged her to ask if he had a trusted adult at school. And she's like, of course he does, he's got the account. And she started naming all the resources. And I was like, but ask him. And he shared he didn't, but he really wanted to meet the shop teacher. And so she brilliantly connected him, talked about trust. And he wanted to meet the shop teacher because he wanted to help build this remote control lawnmower that the shop teacher had been talking about at a school meeting. And all of a sudden, so she connected him, and he would come to school 3 mornings a week to build the remote control lawnmower, and immediately the hood was off, the head was up, engagement, interest in building relationships. But we don't know that they want to build remote control lawnmowers. We don't know if it's bracelet making or speech or debate. Like there's all, so one thing I've seen is schools asking young people at the beginning of the year, what are your top interests? What are you most excited about? And then allowing them to create their own clubs and their own. My question for all of you is what strategies do you use to influence superintendents and school boards and convincing them that a remote control lawnmower and community and relationships are a prevention tool for radicalization and suicide and school shootings? Because I think I hear in this room we're all in agreement on this huge protective factor, but I don't know the best way to convince some of the ones who make the biggest decisions.
Let's start.
So we have 9 members on our board. And 2 of the members lost someone on February 14th in 2018. We're working on our strategic plan right now, and safety is a top priority in that plan. And we don't have any issue with surrounding to saying what you were just saying. That is very important for our school board. But I would, it really pains me that in other states that they are not learning from the tragedies that happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And unfortunately, they still won't learn after Robb Elementary School. Everybody thinks that this is not going to happen to them, and that needs to stop. And as parents, as professionals, we need to bring it to the school boards, make it a top priority of theirs to make their schools as safe as possible.
So your question is, how do we get the buy-in? Yeah, from the, I think our approach is to target it at all levels, right? We have conversations with school boards about how to roll this out across the school district. I shared with you at the break that we're doing this in New Hampshire. So we're working at the district level or at the state level to get it to all the districts in New Hampshire. But then in other areas, we target it right at the principals or the superintendents. So getting in front of them and, at least from our perspective for NAVITA, explaining to them what trainings we have and what we offer. And one of our trainings is on case management and interventions. And it teaches anybody who wants to take the training on how to have those impactful conversations with students that actually affect change, that we see behavior change as a result of it. And it's rooted in relationships. It's rooted in forming rapport, demonstrating empathy, asking good questions to understand what does the student value, what does the student care about, and how can we leverage that to help them move forward on a continuum of change. And so I think our approach has been I don't want to say throwing spaghetti at a wall because it makes it sound like we don't have a strategy, but we're just reaching out to anybody at any level of the district. Some districts we get buy-in from the teachers who are like, we can't do this work alone anymore. Get us help. At other districts, we get it from the top down, right, coming from the board and getting them to get their schools to do the training. What I would love to see is, and I think this is what you're saying too, is I would love to see federal legislation that mandates that schools do some of this work. And we know that unfortunately schools often don't get financial resources to do programs, to do work, unless those programs are required by law. And so if we can get federal legislation targeted at the right ways to improve school safety, I think we'll get more buy-in from the school districts.
If I could share a story similar to what you were saying, I think what I have seen really valuable is kind of meeting students where they are, whereas also meeting the district leaders where they are. I used to work in career and technical education, and this one school was working on building their work-based learning program. And there was one instance of this one student who would act out all the time, ended up getting herself suspended several times, and she met with the principal, and the principal was like, why are you doing this? Like, what's going on? And she was like, and she said, I just got a job at McDonald's. I really love it. I love working there, and I don't want to be in school because I want to continue working here. She was at risk of being expelled and not being in school, and the principal went to the McDonald's and saw her working, and she was in her element. She spoke with the supervisor, and the supervisor was saying that the student was on track to become a manager at some point because she was really excelling in that environment. She really felt a sense of belonging and community in that environment and purpose. And the school was able to work with the establishment, and they were able to kind of create credits to make sure that she was able to graduate because it was a work-based learning program. So not only were they able to kind of get the student to stay in school and be in that learning environment, but also make sure she was able to graduate. And they were able to extend the program because now students are able to work and kind of have a different learning environment that they would have had than traditional just being in school. So kind of just an example of meeting the students and the school where they are so everyone's priorities are being met.
And I would just add that one of the avenues that we have used with Reimagine Resilience is, and to highlight it again, is that we're very careful with the language that we're using in a way that it is a desired program across the political spectrums, rural, urban areas, across socioeconomic diversity. And I think that's very important, particularly in a highly polarized environment. We don't want educators to sort of shut out certain programs. Additionally, I would say that what has been helpful for us as a team is this opportunity to use storytelling. I have done a lot of book talks, over 200 over the last 2 years, so even prior to Reimagine Resilience. And I think what that has done is created a trusting relationship with the environments that we were brought to. There is a sense of fear among some principals or educators that there will be a liability, that they will be sued if something is said or done that parents dislike. And so building multiple touch points with these communities is very, very important. It's not only the program and the quality and the content, but it's also that relationship that one has to develop longer term and that trust in the relationship. And for us, often, it happens that I might go and talk about the book and the story with middle schoolers, and then educators are there, they hear it, and I mention Reimagine Resilience and what we're doing with educators, and the next thing we know, we are on a Zoom call with the principal who's inviting us to train the educators. So I think patience and relationship building and not placing a judgment on people for their views, but being open-minded enough to allow them to enter a conversation with you, express their concerns or grievances, and take it from there and sort of acclimate to their environment to make sure we can build bridges instead of be destroying them.
Some things I've observed as our team tries to get Invent to Prevent in high schools, as Mackenzie just said, you kind of need to take all strategies. So whether it's the principal, the superintendent, the teacher who hears about the program from another teacher, school safety officer at the state level, all of those routes are viable routes. And you try all of them.
Told you spaghetti at the wall, right?
And different routes will work in different places. And one of the things we've seen with high school is it takes several more touch points than it does to get into a university. It does take that relationship and that relationship building over time. But there's value in perseverance. Other questions? Trey, yes.
Oh, testing. Hey, it's working. Cool. Thank you all so much for all that you do in your own unique ways to contribute to this holistic change. I really appreciate all of y'all. So to answer the question, things that I've seen that work in schools, especially with preventing resilience or creating resilience towards hate-based violence, is creating these healthy containers for students across backgrounds to come together and engage in this like human-to-human type dialogue where they can recognize their shared humanity and how that influences their perspectives on solutions for addressing problems, and how certain efforts and solutions can have unintentional effects on certain communities due to implicit bias that we have. And that's actually the nature of my question. I think as we have conversations about how to prevent violence in schools and make them safer, I know sometimes proposals for what can be done, whether it's placing more intense security, more intense, metal detectors, different things to respond to threats of violence rapidly as soon as possible. Sometimes those efforts can be, for lack of better words, used to unproportionately respond to folks of color and marginalized communities, and respond to, I think as we were talking about before, maybe some level 1, 2 behaviors that they may have differently than white counterparts. So it's great to have people of diverse backgrounds in the room. So I'm curious if you all have had experiences of having people from diverse cultural backgrounds a part of your teams, a part of your boards, in the room as you are crafting initiatives to prevent violence. And if so, like, could you give some examples of that and why that was important? Did that make sense?
Amra, I'm looking at you because I know how diverse your team was.
Sure, absolutely. One, most of my students in general at Columbia come from all over the world, have global backgrounds. Lauren shared her background a little bit, and we have other team members really who I would say had no background in extremism, targeted violence, radicalization. One of the students is another, like Lauren, another critical member of my team. He's doing PhD in philosophy. Brilliant mind, has contributed tremendously to the work that we're collectively doing because he has a very different perspective. He also has, not to speak on his behalf, but very diverse background in terms of what you raised, ethnic, racial, global, international background. Similarly, Tina Kiswani, who is doing her master's in technology and education. I think Lauren, Tina, and Vic together took my course on radicalization, the only course, to my knowledge, taught at a graduate school of education on extremism or radicalization. If there's another one, I would love to connect with a faculty member so that I don't feel lonely in that space. So they took that class, I think it was the first semester during the pandemic. And just to give you an example, I used to have a different type of exam for that course and decided to change everything after meeting them in the first Zoom session and realizing how disempowering the experience of pandemic in Zoom was for them. There was a student who was in Turkey, waking up at 3 in the morning, and really sad that she couldn't be there. There were students in Pakistan, in China. I mean, it was very, very difficult emotionally for all of them. And I said, let's believe that we can do something. So I called up Invent to Prevent and said, you've been asking me for years to do this with my students, and I never had time. I think in pandemic, we have a bit more time, so let's try it. I don't know if it's going to work, if it's going to fail, but let's try it. It was the most empowering experience for me, and I can invite Lauren to speak to that. But the students who joined the team knew nothing about radicalization aside from sort of public information. We're not necessarily going in that direction, come from very different backgrounds than my own. We didn't, in fact, in person meet and we worked together for a year and a half until we had to record something. And just to give you a little sort of funny detail, by the end of that course, our colleague and my former student who was in Turkey had her parents wake up because she was so excited about what we were doing that the parents were waking up and joining our class. But go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it was a really incredible experience, and especially in creating, within their first Invent to Prevent program, we created a course similar to Reimagine Resilience, and in developing the curriculum, we gave every student kind of a list of competencies that we wanted to cover, and we told them, please just create an hour worth of content based on your background, based on your experience that covers these competencies, and we'll Frankenstein it together, and fingers crossed it comes into something coherent. And it was truly magical to kind of see what everyone created and what everyone came up with and how we were able to seamlessly intertwine it to be a really amazing professional development opportunity for educators. So as Amra said, we had people from dance backgrounds, philosophy backgrounds, tech backgrounds. Some were from other backgrounds within Columbia, not even at Teachers College. And what we were able to create was really incredible, and I think gave us a really wide breadth of perspectives and opportunities for educators to become engaged in this topic.
And I would just add that we, through Columbia, then decided to have presentations internationally through Columbia Global Centers, and this is sort of the beginning of Zoom, and people didn't know how to use it or how to even show up, and we had, between the views of individuals who watched the recording and live, we had about 6,000 people watch student presentations on some of the work that they did. So it was, for me as a faculty member, it was an incredible experience and validation that you have to do applied learning for it to matter in the classroom, and you have to be able to bring diverse perspectives. It just made the project that much stronger.
So I'll answer your question sort of from two different angles. One, within NBITA, so within our company, we make really intentional efforts to we have an advisory board, and to have diverse perspectives on the advisory board, and to make sure that we include diversity in all its forms, right, and in all the different ways that we can on our board, so that as we're developing our standards of best practice, as we're developing our risk rubric, as we're developing our violence risk assessment tools, that we are developing them with diverse input to make sure that those voices are a part of the development of our resources and tools. The other lens I'll just speak to your question from is when we're training school districts to set up their teams, recognizing that you only have so many staff to choose from. So sometimes you've got a limited pool, right? Which is a whole different problem about how to get more diverse professionals in our field. But that's a conversation maybe for another day. But when we're training schools how to set up their teams, we teach that it's less about like the person's title and the role they have at the school, and more about the perspective they bring to the team. So while it's important to have a mental health professional on the team, it doesn't have to be like your director. It doesn't have to be the main supervisor. If there's somebody else at the school or within the district that can offer that same mental health expertise and offer another perspective or another lens or another piece of diversity, I'd rather have a diverse, broad, holistic team than have all directors on the team. So less about positionality, more about experience, expertise, and the lens they bring to the team.
Other questions?
Question for Dr. McKenzie. I was wondering if you could talk to us about how pervasive behavioral intervention teams are in schools. Like, is this catching on? Are there a lot more this year than there were last year?
Yep.
How pervasive is it? How much more do you have a way to go? And what is your game plan for making it ubiquitous?
Sure. So I will say that the bulk of our clients, the bulk of the work we do is colleges and universities. You're not kidding when you say it's easier to get in to a college and university than a K through 12 system. So the majority of the teams that we see adopting this comprehensive holistic behavioral intervention team model is at the college and university level. We are seeing increasingly more K through 12 schools buy into this concept of putting in place a more comprehensive spectrum of risk-related behavioral intervention team. So we're seeing more buy-in from the K through 12 level, but it is a stronger battle. Like, it's a bigger hill and a bigger rock to push up the hill to get it into the K through 12 school system. I hope that through the work of like what your organization is doing, the work of some of the federal legislation that's coming out, that we'll see more schools buy into this. We're doing really good work right now, partnering with Texas in getting behavioral intervention teams in schools across the state of Texas. It's usually in response to a tragedy, unfortunately, right? Something has to happen. Like you said, people don't believe it's going to happen in their school district until it does. And then when it does, then they start listening. Then they start putting in these teams. And I wish we could get out in front of that. I meant to say this about your diversity question, but it's a good time to answer it now for your question. Shameless plug, we are offering, so our firm is a civil rights and equity firm, and so we do work on school violence and safety prevention, but we also do a lot of work related to Title IX, sex and gender-based violence, other civil rights issues. And we are offering, starting in September, it's free for all K through 12 educators or sort of ancillary K through 12 partners, a Safety, Equity, and Wellness Institute. And it'll run the academic year long from September to May, once a month, having in Zoom meetings and then asynchronous online learning, looking to advance this idea of safety, equity, and wellness in schools to get out in front of these problems across all problematic behavior, risk-related behavior in the schools. So hopefully we get more traction out of the K through 12 that way.
Do you have a lobbying arm that you can lobby state governments? And is state governments the right level? Can they dictate to the counties, or you have to go county by county? I also noticed you didn't say how pervasive it is. Is it like 1% of schools, K through 12 schools? Is it 10%? So I'd be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, I don't have that data, right? We do a biannual survey that's state of the field, but we're surveying the people that know us, and so 97% of them have a behavioral intervention team, but I don't think that 97% of schools across the country have a behavioral intervention team. So I wish I had a way to survey every single school across the nation to find the answer to that out, but I don't have that capacity within our association. But we do have, yes, a lobbying arm. So we do push for legislation. We sign on to bills that we believe are important. We're working, like I said, with Texas. I'm part of the commission in Oakland County where there was a shooting last fall. I'm part of their commission to look at how they can, as a county, implement behavioral intervention teams. And so it varies whether it hopefully comes from federal legislation with the BIG Act requiring SAMHSA to develop best practices, but we've worked with state laws like the one in New Jersey, and now I'm working at the county level in Oakland County in Michigan. So I think it depends on where you get that buy-in, like where the spaghetti sticks, if it's going to be a county mandate, a state mandate, a federal mandate.
Any other questions?
How do we get access to all the training that's being offered?
Yes, so what we typically do, the same website that you used for the symposium that has the read-ahead materials, information on all of the speakers, there's a resource page there. What we do is we update that resource page with all of the resources that were shared today. So if you go back to that resource page, Neil, I'm speaking the truth here, right? Just checking. If you go back to that resource page, it will be updated with all of the resources that panelists and others in the room are willing to share. If you have resources that have not been spoken of, make sure you connect with Neil, and we'll be happy to add those as well. Again, we recognize the expertise in the room, not just the expertise on the stage. So we're happy to feature anything you care to share with us. Please go back to that website. All right, I told you this was coming. Hands up. Who has completed the survey? Oh, come on, you guys. We are going to end 10 minutes early, which means you have zero excuse as to not complete that survey.
I know what it takes.
Again, our evaluation team is in the room. Make us look good, please. We look good by actually having people complete the survey. So please join me in thanking this fantastic panel, especially those who are willing to appear twice.